All right, let's talk about a really powerful psychological trap. It's something that messes with our decisions every single day, from big multi-billion-dollar projects all the way down to, which movie we decide to finish watching. It's called the sunk cost fallacy, and honestly, learning how to spot it is kind of like a superpower.
Or how about this? Have you ever forced yourself to finish a really, really terrible meal just because you paid a lot for it? Or sat through an awful movie because you already bought the ticket? If any of that sounds familiar, yep, you've been caught in the sunk cost trap. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break down what this trap actually is, look at some pretty epic disasters it's caused, dig into the weird psychology that makes it so darn powerful, and then, the most important part, figure out how to escape it. Okay, first things first. Let's get a really clear handle on this. What exactly do we mean when we say sunk cost?
A sunk cost is pretty much what it sounds like. It's any cost, whether that's money, time, or even just effort that you've already spent. It's gone. Poof. You can't get it back, no matter what you decide to do next. And this is the absolute key distinction you have to make. On one side, you've got your sunk costs. They're in the past, they're unrecoverable. On the other side, you've got prospective costs. Those are all about the future and the choices you can still make. Now, according to any rational economic model, only those future costs and benefits should matter when you're making a choice. The past, it's totally irrelevant. Economists have some great little sayings for this. They say worrying about sunk costs is like crying over spilt milk. And the costs themselves, that's just water under the bridge. They're just poetic ways of saying, look, what's done is done. It's time to move on. And this is where it gets really interesting, because there's this huge gap between how we should make decisions, rationally, and how our very human brains actually go about doing it.
The rational way to do things has a name, the bygones principle, and it's super simple. It just means let bygones be bygones. When you're faced with a choice, you should only weigh the future costs against the future benefits. That's it. Everything that came before this exact moment, it's just noise.
Let's make this real with an example. Take a look at that top scenario. Imagine you've spent $30 million on a new power plant. Now, to finish it, you got to spend another $70 million. But bad news, the project's total value has dropped to only $65 million. So what's the rational choice? You abandon it. Why would you spend $70 million to get something worth $65? That's a losing deal. The $30 million you already spent doesn't matter. Now look at the bottom row. If that new value is $75 million instead, well, now you continue, because spending 70 to get 75 times is a good deal. See? The past investment doesn't change the math of what to do next. But that's not what we humans tend to do, is it? This is where the sunk cost fallacy gets us. It's our weird tendency to stick with something, to keep going, precisely because we've already invested so much. It's that little voice in our head saying, I can't quit now. I've already put in so much money. We're literally throwing good money after bad. And this isn't just about finishing a big meal at a restaurant. This little mental glitch has led to some truly epic, catastrophic decisions on a global scale. The absolute poster child for this is the Concorde supersonic jet. I mean, the British and French governments knew early on that this thing was a commercial disaster, but they had already sunk so much money and so much political pride into it, they felt like they just couldn't stop. So they kept pouring billions and billions into a plane that never, ever turned a profit. And you see this everywhere. Utility companies finish building nuclear plants they knew were never going to be economical. Businesses will try to justify prices based on their R&D costs, which are already spent and gone. And then there's the really scary stuff, like something called plan continuation bias. It's a close cousin of our fallacy, where pilots have literally stuck to their original flight plan, flying straight into a disaster because they were too committed to change course.
So this just begs the question, right? Why? If it's so obviously irrational, why are our brains so hardwired to fall for this trap over and over again?
Well, it seems to boil down to 4 main psychological drivers. First, we just hate appearing wasteful. Quitting a project feels like admitting that everything we did before was a complete waste. Second, it's way worse when we feel personally responsible for that first decision. Third, and this one's weird, once we commit to something, our brain magically becomes more optimistic that it's going to work out. And finally, framing matters a lot. We make totally different choices depending on whether we see them as a potential gain or a potential loss. Let's talk about that optimism bias for a second because it's wild. Check out this classic experiment. Researchers went to a horse track and they asked people how confident they were that their horse would win. Get this. The people who were about to place a bet said their horse had a fair chance, but the people they talked to who had placed the exact same bet just 30 seconds earlier, they rated their horse's chances as good. The simple act of putting their money down instantly made them more confident. It's like their brains were already working overtime to protect that investment. And it's really important to remember the sunk cost fallacy isn't some isolated glitch in our thinking. It's just one of dozens and dozens of known cognitive biases. These are all mental shortcuts our brains use to make sense of a complicated world. And as you can see, our minds are constantly taking these little shortcuts that can lead us pretty far away from a purely rational decision. Okay, so we know what it is, we know why we do it, we've seen the damage it can cause. So now, for the million-dollar question, how do we actually escape the trap? The solution, really, is to circle all the way back to the beginning. You have to constantly, consciously remind yourself of the bygones principle. What's in the past is in the past. What's spent is spent. The only things that matter for any decision are the consequences from this moment forward. So here's a practical 4-step mental framework you can use. Step 1, acknowledge what's truly sunk. Just admit what costs are gone forever. Step 2, actively force yourself to ignore them. A fantastic mental trick is to ask yourself, if I hadn't already invested in this, would I choose to do it now knowing what I know today? Step 3, focus only on what happens next. Assess the future costs and future benefits. And finally, step 4, choose the option that gives you the best future outcome, even if it means admitting the past was a loss. So I'll just leave you with this final question to chew on. Think about it. What in your life, a project, a career, maybe even a belief or a relationship, are you continuing to pour your time and energy into, not because it has a great future, but just because you've already invested so much in its past? Just recognizing that's the first and biggest step to cutting your losses and making a much better decision starting today.